It gives us
And
life.
we're live.
Hi, everyone. This is Fresh Press Science, hosted by Susanna and Gabi. And we are a show that comes online every week thanks to the SciCommunity. And you can find us on the Nexus channel on YouTube. And each week we get together to talk about whatever is exciting in the news and look at the science behind it. My name is Susanna Harris, and I am down here in Chapel Hill.
I'm Gabi Serrato Marks, and I'm in Boston. You can find out more information about both of us in the links and as like cards on the stream. I just learned how to do that. So I think if you push the I at the top right, our YouTube channels will come out. So um, if you like what we do, we would really, really appreciate if you could like the video and subscribe to the Nexus channel. It helps us to get more viewers and to sort of see if you like what we're doing or not. So this week, we're going to be talking about how scientists track and predict hurricanes in our kind of our science bucket. And then we have another topic for later on. So speaking of hurricanes, this is very timely for you down there, Susanna. So how are you doing?
Uh, so I'm pretty far inland. It takes me about 2 or 3 hours to get to the coast. So while Hurricane Florence has hit the coast and she's kind of like lashing out towards especially places like Wilmington, which is a lovely beach, if I open my window right now, it looks like it's kind of a regular evening. I think that it's going to start raining and being really windy in the next, I don't know, 12 to 24 hours. But I think I'm pretty well prepared. I have enough granola bars to last until probably next summer. And again, totally agree with what Gabi said of if you like us, like, comment, subscribe. But let me know down in the comments and as people are chatting, what are your suggestions for non-perishable food? Because I went with granola bars and like tuna. Because I went to the grocery store panicked like everyone else. But if anybody else has like better ideas for sustenance, that would be helpful. If you like, especially if you camp. I don't camp, and so I was, I don't know. I learned how much I don't know about like non-perishable foods.
About sustenance. My favorite is dried fruit, in case you're wondering.
I do love dried fruit. The problem is that there's a fine line between things that are sort of healthy for me and things that I will just eat in mass quantities. So I only got the tiniest portion of trail mix. I wanted to get the giant bin, but it was like I went grocery shopping on Sunday and I would have eaten the entire thing by now. Yeah, so it's kind of been a waiting game, and
Yeah,
so
are
I
you
think
tracking the storm at all?
well, I'm trying to track the storm. So I've been looking at a couple different sites. Most of the time, I get my weather from weather.gov, which is really reliable but kind of terrible to look at. Or Weather Underground is nice to look at. Weather.com is just useless unless you really like clickbait. Uh, so I guess I've been trying to track it. I've been relentlessly updating Twitter. But you know more about all of this stuff, right?
Well, I try, but the funny thing is that compared to the biologists I know, I probably know more about hurricanes, but compared to all of my friends at school, I know like the least about climate and rocks. So it's kind of funny that like when I talk to biologists and you, I'm like the one who knows about these things. So my understanding is that there's a lot of really big, complex models that are kind of behind the predictions that we see. So we just see the end result, which is the probable trajectory and usually that cone of where they think it will go. So there's basically a ring of uncertainty. And that's because when you're running lots of different computer models, there's so many different options in terms of randomness, in terms of which way the winds are blowing, so many different ways that the hurricane could move. And even then, there's some options that are really, really unlikely, but they might still happen. So they kind of have to keep that in mind. I hope I'm not wrong, but I think that's what happened with Hurricane Sandy. Like it was really unlikely for it to like hook in, but then it did, or something along those lines. So it can be hard to predict exactly what's happening, and that's part of why different sites have different analyses or things like that.
Yeah. So Okay, so there's a bunch of new words that I learned pretty much this week. Because I'm originally from Iowa. I was here when Hurricane Matthew hit, but I was so oblivious to everything that I ended up on Franklin Street when we lost power. And it really didn't, there was some flooding in Chapel Hill, but it was basically like a bad thunderstorm. This is the first time in my entire life that I have prepared for a hurricane.
Mm.
And I pretty much totally overdid it. I think I'm pretty well set up if I
Like a
lose
prepper now.
water. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. This will probably be the like most prepared I've ever been in my life. But so I learned some new words. One thing I learned is something called the spaghetti models, where there's
Mm.
like the streamers coming out. And in my interpretation, I looked at those models and I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be in the middle of these, kind of like when you're looking at trends on a graph. And maybe that's more likely, but are those all potential tracks for the hurricane?
My understanding is that they are all potential tracks, but kind of like you were saying, there's a range of how likely it is that each one will occur. And usually, when there's spaghetti models, that means that the scientists who are making those or running them have specifically said how many hurricanes they want to simulate. And so, a lot of the times, my friends who do like past hurricane simulation can make spaghetti models of hurricanes, and then they can see how many look like what actually happened. And so, based on what scientists know about how hurricanes have behaved in this area in the past, which there actually aren't all that many, because this is further north than most hurricanes usually are. I think you probably read about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's all the potential tracks that they've generated from their model.
And so I've been hearing, okay, the words I've been hearing the most are based on the European model. And like my reaction is always like, the European model is better because everything in Europe is better. But then I was asking other people, and so there's the European model, there's the North American model, and then I guess there's a ton other ones. I like
I
why do we need different models?
I don't know the difference between the different models specifically. Like, what is what does the European model do differently? So if you do know and you're watching this, please tell us in the comments.
Yeah.
Usually, the different models are based on different wind forces, kind of like how much scientists weight different factors.
Hmm.
So I kind of want to come up with like a bad analogy. Like, some people, when they go to the grocery store, they will start at the vegetables, and maybe that means they'll end up buying a lot of vegetables, and by the time they get to the snacks, they're like, oh, I've already have enough stuff in my cart, so I'm not going to buy any more vegetables, or sorry, I'm not going to buy any snacks.
Yeah.
But then if you start at the snacks, you're not going to end up with as many healthy vegetables. But someone who's on the paleo diet might start at the snacks, feel sad, and then go back to vegetables.
I love that.
Or
That's a
something
great,
with protein.
yeah. That
How's
okay, that makes a lot
that?
of sense. I think that's yeah, because it's like different like different weightings. It's like WEIGHTINGS. Like you're
Yes.
weighting different things more heavily. Um, yeah, so I guess you know you can kind of choose your favorite. You know, people are making bets online, and I don't know. I'm a big fan of using humor anywhere. I've had to be careful to not make too many jokes because it is a like terrifying, life-threatening situation, and hopefully everybody who's in any danger has evacuated. Here in Chapel Hill, we aren't in enough danger to evacuate, which was really nice. We're just likely to lose power and water for a bit, so get to kind of re-up on all my survival skills. But I've got my dogs here, and they think this is the best. This is the best situation ever because we have been chilling all day. I worked out and put on clothes exclusively for this. You're probably like the closest to human interaction that I'm going to have for the next 3 days. And as an introvert, that's amazing. I am thrilled.
I would be bored out of my mind. I would be like bothering you probably all day, bothering people all day.
Yeah, I am texting. I'm a little worried for if and when the internet and or like cell stuff goes out, but yeah, I've gotten a couple solicitations to hang out with people like tonight or tomorrow or something, and I'm like, I would rather not get stuck for days on end with
A
people.
person.
Yeah. Anyway, a bit off track of the science. So, but yeah, I've been using Twitter a lot, and actually, I had a friend who recommended using Reddit. I do love how kind of the social mind, the hive mind of people can sometimes be really useful. That there's kind of this weighting system again, where people who give good input, their input goes up higher. And
Mm-hmm.
so somebody who is consistently giving really good, useful input, their words will count more. And I wish more things were done like this, where it's not like the loudest person gets to speak. It's the most trustworthy in terms of what turns out to be useful. So oftentimes things like Wikipedia and Reddit have the most curated, best information. And they've been Reddit's been great for like up to date stuff. So
That's cool. I've never used Reddit, but I have used Twitter, especially for snowstorms up here in Boston. I like following the National Weather Service or their office in the local area because they put out really good, clear tweets with really nice diagrams. So
yeah, yeah, no, they I have used Reddit all of like 20 times, including this. I use it on a browser, which is apparently horrible. I don't know, but um, yeah, I'm liking the Reddit stuff too because I really usually use Twitter because it has this wide network and it always has like the prettiest graphics and like the NASA shots of this hurricane are
mhm.
incredible. I don't really have anything to compare it to because, but apparently the Hurricane Florence is bigger than the two Carolinas combined now, and it is just
It's
it's
huge.
beautiful. Yeah. But yeah, on Twitter it can be really good, but I also like get random comments in there that make me mad, and I'm like trapped in my house. So,
That's how I feel about Reddit.
oh yeah, I don't look through other people's comments.
Okay.
I only want the info.
The thing I've heard about Reddit that people like is that it's not so much about you as a person, it's more about your opinions and your information.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are kind of like spats, it's more about your actual idea and not like, well, I don't think you're very cool. So
Yeah.
I've heard that that's a good thing about Reddit. But
Quick aside that will probably be taken out when we do the editing. I got into a Twitter fight with somebody this week. I was just in a bad mood, and this human uh, came on to my like I sent something positive to someone else, and she was like, "Oh, really? You're gonna support that person with their head high in the air?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, I can't believe it. You think you talk about mental health, but you're supporting someone who bullies others." And I was like, "What?" And it like totally spun
whoa.
out of control. So that's like, yeah, most of the time when I leave Twitter, I'm like, that's not a that's
Yeah,
not a place.
less fun.
Yeah. Oh, I had a question for you
Yes.
because climatology. Okay, I keep seeing stuff about that the weather is getting worse because of global warming, and they're pointing out that there's these like four hurricanes now in the Atlantic, and that maybe all of this stuff is getting worse or it's less predictable because of the global warming. Is this a thing?
I feel, yeah, I love this question. So I did some research on this today and yesterday, and my understanding is that there are parts of the hurricane system that can become more severe because of climate change. So, because the air is warmer, it can hold on to more water, which means that the hurricane can, when it does come over land, can dump more rain. So that means the flooding could be worse, could be more severe. So there's kind of differences. I think, I hope this is right. There's differences in how people feel about whether frequency of hurricanes is increasing. Some people say that it's just that we're being affected by it more, we're noticing them more. So I think that's still a little bit up for debate, but what is very certain is that the air can hold more water. Like that's just a physical principle. Um, and there's been a new study that just got released yesterday, and it actually hasn't been peer reviewed yet because there hasn't been time. So
Ooh.
Yeah, pretty cool. So these researchers put out a paper or sort of a report saying they have found that the diameter of the hurricane of Florence is 50 miles larger than it would have been without the impact of climate change. So if we had never had any anthropogenic climate change and we had this hurricane forming, which is totally possible, hurricanes happen without climate change.
Right.
But because of the effects of climate change and warming that's happening in the Atlantic, it is kind of bigger and badder.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I guess I obviously read and agree with the scientific consensus that global warming is happening, humans are impacting it, and in a like way that is increasing global warming, right? Um, I always have a hard time wrapping my head around what is, a single data point versus what is a trend, right? And that's what I've been told is kind of the difference between weather is, what's the weather out today or this week or this month versus a trend is like compared to the last 10 years, what is this year of weather like? Um, so how can we even assess changes in climate or risky things about climate if it's ongoing? How do we know that a data point isn't just an outlier? How do we know that this hurricane, because people say this is going to be maybe the worst in 60 years, or some people are saying this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen since being at NOAA, NOAA. How can we know that it's not just a blip and we won't have another 60 years until this happens again?
that's a good one. I think we can look at the frequency of these giant storms, and it very much could be a blip and it could be another 60 years. But what's happening is that the really big storms, so you might have heard of like the 10-year storms, 100-year storms, like a 500-year flood, that kind of thing. They're happening more frequently. So instead of a storm that should have been a 100-year storm is going to actually be, I don't know, an 80-year storm or something along those lines. So even if the events aren't occurring much more frequently, they're bigger and worse and scarier.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that
I've kind
answers
of been
it.
like, yeah, I've been kind of thinking of it as like when you go to the beach, not to use beach metaphors in a hurricane, but when you go to the beach, um, every handful of waves is a big wave, right? If you're out there playing and splashing around,
Yep.
occasionally for no good reason, it'll be like, whoops, the timing hit that the outgoing water really created this big little like big wave and just crashes over you. And then the rest of the waves are fine. And it's some frequency, maybe if you counted, you could find a pattern. But then as the tide comes in or if the weather gets bad, then the height of those really big waves or like how often they come changes. So I guess that's the difficulty of trying to set aside our kind of human tendency to either minimize or to find trends where there aren't
Mm-hmm.
any and
Find new
actually be
patterns.
able to like look at the data and see how is this trending.
That might be a good time to transition to finding your uncertain career path. I don't know if that's too much of a stretch, but the next thing we had wanted to talk about was graduate school applications, because we had a lot of people asking about kind of our experience as grad students and how we applied. So based on popular demand, we're going to talk a little bit about advice in each part of our Fresh Press Science so that
Yeah.
everyone knows.
So I'm going to half pause for a second so we can leave a space for edits and do like a quick mini intro. There's one Mark from Question Mark said, I don't think we need a European model. I think they have their own Earth simulator supercomputer to generate the models on. There's so much computers. It's crazy. So I'm going to do something weird because I realized that I don't want this to be in this direction. Hello, everyone.
Oh, we're switching, going horizontal.
Yeah, because I used to do this, and then it was like last time with Christina and I had to do it up and down because we were doing the SciCommunity just on.
Oh, live.
Yeah, so this looks better for YouTube. Um, okay, so
Looks great.
yeah, that was good. All right, everyone, thanks for sticking around. I guess we'll do a tiny intro here too. this is going to look weird in live, but there's like 8 people and they all love us and they're lovely humans.
We like
Geo
you.
and Mean and Starna. I don't know how to say that one. And Dan Frame is my friend. So, all right. So this is the part of Fresh Press Science where we give advice about graduate school. And I'm currently a 5th year PhD candidate at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. My name is Susanna.
I'm Gabi. I'm currently a 4th year PhD student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
USA.
In Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA.
Northern Hemisphere, planet Earth. So, yeah. Oh my gosh, it's Stina. Oh, okay, that makes more sense. Sorry. That's totally.
You're learning how to pronounce names.
Cool. Yeah. So today we want to talk about a question that you all have asked us, which is, how do you choose a graduate school to apply to? And how do you apply to grad schools? What does that even look like?
And how to not freak out.
Yeah, how to not freak out, how to maintain your regular life while you're doing it, because, you know, a lot of times the advice kind of fits in with a lifestyle of you're not doing anything else. For some reason, you have all the time in the world and you just get to sit around for 6 months and do grad school applications. And I have not met a single person for whom that is true. I was finishing up my undergrad. Did you go straight from grad school or undergrad?
Yeah, I went straight also.
Yeah.
So yeah, no free time. I was writing my honors thesis at the same time as I was applying for graduate school.
Yeah.
Do not recommend.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of resources, and we've linked our most favorites in the description. But each of us are going to talk a little bit about our top 3 tips for applying. So do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll just go through my 3 and you can go through yours, and then we can kind of just talk about them. And as we're talking, there's some really good questions. Down in the comments. Feel free to keep adding those if you have any advice or if you have any questions for us. So my 3 tips are, first of all, reach out to the graduate students that are there, especially in the world of social media and emails. It's not at all creepy to, if you have any questions about a department, if you want to know about funding, if you want to know what the climate is, send an email to someone in the lab that you're interested in, or send an email even to the director of the graduate studies and say, could you recommend someone I talk to? People aren't going to be weird about that. And it's going to be maybe more easily, like, it might be more easy to get information from those people. My second one would be, this sounds funny, but only apply to places that you want to go to. So often people choose backup schools and you ask them, you know, oh, well, what are you excited about there? And they'll say, well, if I don't get in anywhere else, I'll go there. And I can tell you right now, if you're not excited about the research, the place, the people, it is going to be a waste of time and money. And then prioritize your own efforts. You only have so much time, and that's going to be dependent on if you're doing other things at the same time, if you have a full-time job, if you're a full-time student, and how many programs you feel like you need to apply to. You're better off making a list and deciding what are the top priorities, what do I really need to spend my time on. Otherwise, it's really easy to get bogged down in the little details.
Awesome. I really like those. Those are things I wish that someone had told me before I applied. So that's a good way to start, at least.
Yeah, well, and I feel like the links that we provided have really good, I think there's one of 10 easy steps and a timeline to do these things. And those are super helpful. But again, going back to the first tip of talk to grad students, a lot of the stuff that gets lost in those big things, those big timelines or to-do lists, is kind of the human factor and the remembrance that you're just a person and this is a hard process.
Yeah, if you don't know any grad students or you don't feel like you can reach out to any, there are 2 here who you could talk to, and we'll try to point you in the right direction if we can. But feel free to reach out to us on Instagram. I think it's probably where we're most active.
Yeah.
We're all
Yeah.
over the
And
place. Reach out to us.
yeah, reach out to us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter, probably find us anywhere. Pretty easy to find. Both of our names are pretty easy to find. Susanna L. Harris, Gabi Serrato Marks. Our information will be in the links down below. And that's a good reminder that if you like this stuff, if you have anything else you want us to talk about, especially about grad school or even science, put a comment and the stuff down below. We will get to it. We are really excited to talk to you all as a community. And again, liking and commenting just really helps us to spread our message and to engage more and more viewers and get more feedback.
Yay!
Yeah. So what about your 3 tips?
My first one is to stay as organized as you can, especially if you're applying to a lot of schools or you're emailing a lot of people. It depends on your process, which we can probably get into in another video. But for my program, for geoscience type programs, you have to email professors and find out if they're taking students individually before you can even apply for the program. So I was emailing probably upwards of 30 different professors. And I didn't end up applying to all those schools, but I needed to find out if they were taking students, what projects they were working on. So it was really important to keep just an Excel spreadsheet of who I had talked to and when, what the deadlines were for those schools. So start a spreadsheet or a journal, whatever works for you. It's really important to stay organized. My next one is that a lot of applications and fellowships and basically anything you apply for, a lot of it's luck. It's about who has funding already, who has room for students, and it's not a reflection on you or your future success. Even if you got rejected from every single graduate school, that's not a reflection on you. You could probably get some feedback on your applications and figure out how to improve, but it doesn't mean that you as a person will not be successful. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind when you're going through any kind of application process. No one thinks I'm going to be great at getting a PhD. I'm going to get into every school I apply for. I don't know anyone who thought that. So it's important to hold on to that and remember that you are great, even if you are having trouble with the applications. And my last one, kind of related to that, is that you should ask people to read your personal statements, even though it feels kind of awkward, because even though it is a lot of luck, it is good to put your best foot forward and to submit the best application materials you can. So it's great to have friends and your professors, people who are writing your recommendation letters. It's great to have them read over your materials that you're submitting so that then they can give you feedback. It's kind of weird because these personal skills, we're talking all about your history and why you want to go to graduate school, and it can feel kind of awkward, at least it did for me. But it's still really, really important to try to get feedback on. So 1, be organized. 2, it's not you, it's them. And 3, have people read your stuff.
Yep. I think
that's my summary.
No, I think that's awesome. Especially I totally resonate with the personal statement thing, because it's really scary, right? You write this thing and you feel uncomfortable about writing it, and the first draft is always garbage. I have never had a first draft of a personal statement look like anything like what I eventually submit. And especially since with grad school applications, it's probably not enough to just get your mom to read it, or your best friend, or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever. You probably need somebody who has some standing, either as a grad student, or professors are always great because they know the mindset of the people who are going to be reading your personal statement. A personal statement needs to be really tailored to whatever you're applying for. Even though the prompt is like, tell us about you, the professors want something very different than even a fellowship application. So absolutely have people read it. Don't take it too personally. If you're freaked out about people reading it, try reading other people's and note within yourself that you're not judging them. And honestly, you don't really care. When you read a friend's personal statement, it's a little tricky. When you read a stranger's personal statement, you're like, that's compelling. Well written. Okay, cool. You're not sitting there like, oh, are they the worst human ever? Do I hate them for self-aggrandizing? No, they're just telling you about themselves.
That's a good point. I agree with that.
So we do have some...
Yeah. We're going to say the same thing. You say it.
Okay. So we have some good questions coming in. Keep adding questions there. If you're watching this not live, feel free to keep adding questions. We will answer them or find us again on Instagram. So Dan Frame asks, what's your opinion or experience with the importance of academic or professional references when applying? Also quantity versus quality. So do you have any feelings on this?
For me, I didn't have any professional references in that I had only been an undergrad. So I had people I had worked for as a research assistant, but that was kind of more as experience for me. And I guess I got paid for it. It was a job, but it wasn't like an industry type reference. And for me in geology, I don't think that hurt because I had the research experience with them. So I wasn't just having my professors whose class I had taken, I was actually talking with, or I actually had letters from people I had worked under. So I don't know, I guess that's like a middle ground to that. What do you think?
Um, I think you have to hit a certain metric on quantity. Um, you need 3 good references. At the bare minimum, you need 2 stellar references, but I would still, you can still find 3 people that will speak to you. As far as academic versus professional, as long as you tailor it towards what you're applying for. So if you're applying for a research position in grad school, right? I'm a graduate researcher. I made sure that all of my writers were going to talk about my potential as a researcher and as a student. You can do this by sending your letter writers a quick CV or a quick resume and say, these are the things that I'm going to be talking about in my application. Can you highlight them? It might seem really self-absorbed to tell your letter writers what they should talk about, but as a letter writer, it is so appreciated, because otherwise you're like, yeah, I know this person, but do I talk about how nice they are? Do I talk about how brilliant they are? If you tell your letter writer, I want to focus on research, they can write their letter towards that point. As far as like quantity goes, some applications will allow you to put up to 5. I would only do 5 or 4 if there was some really weird reason. So I would have, I don't know, my recommendation is to try to get professors to write this, because that's whose opinion matters.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Right. So, which is difficult, because a lot of people that I talk to say, oh, I have this really amazing outreach that I do, or I have, I'm really involved in the community. I've had people ask if their pastor can speak for them. I think that would be a case where having a 4th or a 5th person write in is actually okay. If you have someone who is going to speak to a totally different part of your character, then maybe have an extra person. But otherwise, really tailor it to what they want to be reading. Can you hear my dog snoring right now? Yeah, it's pretty good. Hurricane is rough over here.
Oh, they look super cute.
Florence is taking us out. Yeah. So, okay. From Stina, we have, what if you don't have that many internships or jobs in science to show because you had to work a lot to financiate your studies? Okay, that makes sense, right? Like the majority of your time has been spent either in school or paying for that school.
I see this on Twitter getting talked about a bunch, especially talking about like inclusion in STEM professions. That a lot of the time people used to say like, oh, don't put on your lifeguarding job or your job in the dining hall. Like those aren't part of your academic CV. Whereas my understanding is that now a lot of people are saying, well, actually, if you've managed to work and do well in school and find that you're really interested in science and research, like that's great. And so a lot of PIs will kind of reward you for having done hard work, even if it's not specifically science related. So I think if you can try to show why you think you'll be good at research or why you think you'll enjoy research, that's important. Even if that was just a class that was really research intensive, for example. And you can say, like, I worked this job in the dining hall and it taught me this. This is how I have applied it to my studies or something like that. You can kind of spin it, if you will, in a way that works. But it's not a bad thing to have worked jobs outside of science.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And especially, like you said, if it's a research intensive class, or maybe the grad program you're going into isn't that involved in research. I think also, like you said, of upspinning, of explaining why this makes you a better candidate, that you know how to balance real life with school and with other things. So I think that can be a really big asset. I would also say, and this might not be the most popular opinion, but I really think it's true, that if you have no research experience at all, you should take time before you go to graduate school. Graduate school and graduate research is intense. And as scary as it is to take a year to get that experience, or even a semester, or whether it's volunteering, things like that, if the reason you're worried about your application is that you have no experience in what you're applying for, it is worth your time to go out and find out if you like it. Because doing a 5 year, doing a 5 year program in anything, in something you don't know if you like, is really scary. But more importantly, if you start in on that PhD and you're there for 3 years and you hate it, you're going to get almost nothing out of it. You're going to leave with few transferable skills and no title. So
you might leave with a master's, but it's still better to not go into something that you have no idea if you're going to like. So I totally agree, but you're not stuck if you're in a PhD program.
Well, it depends. UNC microbiology has this really cute thing where you can't master's out after 3 years, which is so fucked up. I don't care.
If you've stayed for like less than 3.
Yeah, so the program that I'm in, if you're there for less than 3 years and you decide getting a PhD is not right for you, you can take a few extra tests and things, write a master's thesis, and leave. But as the syllabus stands, if you have been there for 3 years, you are no longer able to master's out.
That's crazy.
It's a lot. So a little bit outside of this video, but yeah, maybe it's a good reminder too, that if you're on the fence about a program you're applying to, look into their policies. Find out how many years they guarantee funding for. Find out what they do if your professor leaves. Find out what they do if you're not doing well and you need to leave the program. Are you going to leave with a master's, or are you going to have to jump through a bunch of hoops and maybe leave with nothing? It can be all really overwhelming, but again, I think that's why one of my main points was prioritizing things, that you can get so bogged down in all these little questions where the most important things are probably, do you like the places, and are you a good fit, and are they a good fit for you?
Someone here asked how long our undergrad took. I guess when I'm paraphrasing it. So someone asked how long your undergrad took, and the fact that people outside of Germany go straight to PhD after undergrad is kind of odd to her. This is from Stina, because in Germany you basically need a master's degree. And someone else seconded that, I think, that the US system of undergrad to grad school is different than it is elsewhere. So it's definitely good to say that we have a really US focused view. We both went to undergrad in the US and now we're in grad school in the US. So my undergrad took me 4 years and my PhD program is going to take me 5-ish. 5 is the plan, but you never know.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. And it is interesting talking to people from Europe on both ends, that before they go into PhD, they're like, oh, wow, you got in there so fast. And then once they're in there, oftentimes I'll tell people like I'm a 5th year PhD. And if they're from Europe, they're like, what does that mean? I'm like, no, I didn't do a master's. This is just all together.
Like, what have you done wrong that you're still there?
I ask myself that a lot.
Oh, no.
No,
For people who don't know, the PhD programs in Europe and Australia and New Zealand are usually more like 3 years. So it would be kind of odd to be there for 5 full years.
Yeah. And again, there's lots of things to take in mind or take into account, which are what are the costs? What are the relative costs of the places? Are you going to be generally happy in the areas? Again, but I think our points are really important of talk to people and organize, set your priorities and also understand that it's not you. Like, I love that point because every year, now that I'm in a department, I get to see some of the background workings of it. Sometimes the microbiology department takes 11 people. Sometimes they take 5. So a person who is the 6th on their list in one year would totally get in, no problem. The second year wouldn't be there. So it's so competitive and it can be so catty. Things like, I think Grad Cafe is still up and running. I don't know if you ever used that. It was a website that people would go on and talk about their GRE scores. They would talk about when they got invitations and things like that. And it could be really helpful because you have all this stress. But it was also just absurd. Luckily, I will tell you that once people get into PhD programs or grad school programs just in general, the first year they still are a little bit snobby, but by the second or third year, everyone has been taken down so many pegs that it's like a solidarity. We're going to get through this. None of us is better. The difference in personality from interview weekend to graduation is night and day.
I totally agree. And also that once you're in, your GRE scores matter none, I would say. Maybe some fellowships care, but
yeah, it mattered a little bit, I think, for the NSF, but
yeah,
but barely. I mean, the NSF more than anything else is just like flipping 25 coins and then picking heads or tails. It just doesn't. Well, I have feelings about that. So yeah, we've got some other people talking about they took time off and did biotech. I think my recommendation in general is that if you're not sure if you want to apply to grad school, take a little bit of time. There's always going to be next year.
And you don't have to see it as time off. It's just time doing other stuff. Like if you went and did consulting for 2 years before you decided to, I don't know, go to law school. I don't know what consultants do. If you did consulting for 2 years and then went to tech, people wouldn't see that as time off. They would just see it as something different. And so it's okay to see it that way for academia also.
Yeah, especially if you are building a resume. If you are sitting down and actively trying to build your resume, I think that honestly, graduate schools and professors will appreciate that. That is where it's important to talk to professors and things like that. If you write in your application, I took off these 2 years because I wanted to get this experience, they're going to love you. Anything that you can do to show that you are not accidentally getting into a PhD program is a good thing. Not that many people do, but a lot of people will go there because it's just the next thing to do. And that can be really difficult. So I knew I liked research, and to be honest, when things have gotten really rough in grad school, my just general love of science is what keeps me going. Is that as bad as it gets, I can still go in and learn something new, and I love that. That's the biggest perk.
I had that exciting like fresh data day today. Like I got 2 different pieces of good news and then I got awesome data. I was like, okay, yeah, this is why I do it. Like this is why the long days become worth it. And that feeling of like I now know something that no one has ever known before is like, that's pretty cool.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
In a lot of ways, there's terrible things about academia and grad school, but we're also really, really lucky to be able to spend all of our time learning and generating new knowledge. Like that's so freaking cool. So I like to reflect on that sometimes. It's a really lucky place to be.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to end actually, because it reminds me we should totally do a show about the perks of grad school. I think, we do one about the perks, one about the downsides. Again, anyone watching, please let us know in the comments or on Instagram. Our links are down below. What you want us to talk about in the future. What burning questions do you have about grad school that you want advice to in kind of a no-nonsense way? We have opinions and we're not afraid to share them. So if you have any questions about grad school, want to get an idea from people, send us your questions and we will make an episode out of it.
And if you are a grad student or anyone and you disagree with our advice, I would love to hear that too, because it's always better to have more voices than for you to just be like, they don't know what they're talking about. Bye. I would way rather hear from you and we can talk about why we disagree. I think that's always really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you write a post about it, definitely tag us.
Yeah. I think next week or at some point, we're going to talk about why I love probiotics and Susanna thinks they're fake news.
Fake news.
Right. So we can
Yeah.
handle
Yeah.
disagreeing with stuff.
That'll be good. And yeah, come back next week where we are going to be talking with Eduardo Martino. And we're going to be talking about, find out if that's right. We're going to be talking
Yes.
about superconductors and the ethics of research publishing. So they're tied together. I think it's going to be really interesting. Ethical conversations are always a fun time. So please come back next week. We will be here on the Nexus channel with the SciCommunity. Again, my name is Susanna Harris.
I'm Gabi Marks.
Bye.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, do that.
Bye.